If everyone could take their seats, please. I call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Community Unit School District 201, today, Tuesday, December 20th, 2011. A roll call, please, Ms. Anderson? Or Ms.
I've got it.
Caparelli, you're doing it, okay.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli is here. Mr. Charleston?
Present.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing on the tentative levy. And the chair will open the public hearing on the proposed 2011 tax levy, noting that the information regarding the public hearing was published in the Westmont Progress on December 7th, 2011. Mrs. Anderson, did you want to just update the board on the issue?
Like you said, the notice was published in the newspaper, and the levy is the same as was presented on November 22nd. So we're looking in the operational funds, $21,208,000, and then the county levies the debt service, which is estimated at $1.146 million. So we're recommending you approve that as presented.
Are there any board members that have any questions on this or comments?
This is the balloon levy, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And we're anticipating a much lower receipt than that.
Okay.
Okay, are there any public comments on this public hearing? No? Okay, then the chair will announce that the public hearing on the proposed 2011 tax levy has been conducted and is now closed. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Starting with November 22nd, 2011. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 22nd, 2011 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
I had I'm sorry. Wait for the motion, sorry.
So moved.
Thank you. No, I was just waiting for the motion. A couple comments on it. The end of page 1, very at the bottom, it was generally agreed to amend the minutes of the November 8th board meeting to reflect Ms. Hennessy's remarks. I'd like included that Mr. Charleston also wanted it noted that Ms. Hennessy is a vendor for the district whose firm has a direct economic interest in the outcome of the bond issuance decision.
Can you state that? Do you have that in writing for anybody, or can you
No, I
state that
don't,
again?
but I can state it again.
Okay.
Mr. Charleston wanted it noted that Ms. Hennessy's firm, is a vendor of the district has a direct economic interest in the bond issuance decision.
I guess just so I can understand, you want us to re-amend the November 8th minutes?
No. You guys
Well,
approved
that's when you said it, though.
I know, but these were noted as we were talking about the November 8 meeting. These are the November 22.
Right.
November 8, I unfortunately wasn't here, and those minutes were approved. You know, I'm not going to ask us to revisit those.
Okay, I didn't
No.
know if we could or not, that's all I was asking.
There's no reason to,
I'm fine with the
Creative.
statement, I just think.
Does anybody have any comments on that?
Okay, so this was something you said at the last meeting?
the
November 22nd?
When we discussed on the November 22nd meeting, when we approved the November 8 minutes, or when we were reviewing the November 8 minutes for the first time. Something I said on November 22nd.
I don't know. I mean, I remember you mentioning something about, I don't know the exact wording that was used. Maybe you should listen to the tape so we can get the wording correct. And then add it to the comments here, I guess.
I don't have a problem with Dan's wording tonight.
Anyone else? So you're asking to have them put on there, Dan? and
Reflect that
Joel,
yeah.
that you stayed that comment, and Joel, you're asking to have it?
No, I'm just saying, does anyone think it should be reviewed, or is everyone fine with it? I guess that's my question.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine. Okay. Then the motion as amended?
So moved? Or is that the way that works?
No, yeah.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the November 22nd, 2011 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
I would request the chair that we, that we discuss these minutes in closed. There's an appropriate Open Meetings Act exception for discussing closed session meetings, closed session minutes in closed session.
We'll discuss that in closed, and then we'll pull
And
that
then
out.
bring it
discuss
out. Yeah,
next
exactly.
time. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the December 6, 2011 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
I'd like to have something added to these minutes. At the end, or toward the end of this meeting, we talked about getting a date set that our architect would provide us with more concrete numbers, and that's not noted in the minutes. We also talked about having a date set upon which we're making the final dollar amount decision of the bond issuance. I'd just like to have those two things noted in the minutes that
The bond, it looks like the bond one is here.
Is there a date?
says, I questioned it. I think, I just wanted, I mean, those are the two things that Kevin committed to, and I just wanted the notes to reflect that those are, in fact, two dates that were committed to us.
Okay, so you're asking for,
The date that Mr. Cashman is going to provide us with concrete
So the
numbers.
minutes-
I'm not asking for the date, I'm asking for the minutes to reflect that
Reflect
that's
it.
an open
minutes to
item.
reflect that you're
The
looking for the
minutes to
date.
reflect that we have two open items as a result of that meeting. One is a date that Mr. Cashman will be providing more concrete numbers, and a date, what's the deadline for determining the dollar amount for the bond issue.
Okay, great. Okay,
And I have one specific change to the very last two words on the first page. Should go, should be replaced with are headed. Understands that's the way we are headed. That's what I communicated then. Not should go. Mr. Charleston wanted to be sure to go on record that he's not in favor of the non-referendum bonds.
Right.
Understood that that's the direction we were headed.
do you have any comments, Mary Kay?
No, I heard it the other way, but
Yeah, I heard it this way, too.
No, I mean, that's why I expressed my
That's the way we should.
reluctance to non-referendum bonds. That's why I said, to go on record again, I'm not. It's not should
Yeah, that's
go.
fine.
It's, we're headed that way.
I have no objection to changing
It's not a
it.
verbatim record, right? I mean,
Well, no, but that's an important concept.
right.
Right.
I have no issue with changing it.
Okay.
As an aside, the notion that that meeting didn't have a camera, didn't have a podcast, is something that should never happen again at a public board meeting.
I don't know that that's, I mean, that's certainly a valid concern, but it sometimes
Particularly on a
when-
matter of importance, at a Manning meeting at 6:30 in the evening as opposed to a 7, everything about that was different. Mrs. McMahon wasn't there. There was no backstops to verbatim records. There were no backstops to other parties other than the ones in the room who could watch it, hear it, get the full flavor of that meeting. That should never happen again. It is the opposite of transparency.
Why don't we move along, Dan?
Yeah.
All right? Because we could probably get stuck there. It was a posted meeting.
It was well advertised, it was in the newspaper, it was on the school blog, it was blogged about to everybody who's in there. I'm with you, I'd like to be on television as much as possible, but.
Mr. Graham even noted it in his public comment, and I appreciated that as well.
Let's, we're going to allow each board member to finish speaking. Did you have anything else to say?
No, I'm
Mr.
fine.
Armstrong? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the amended minutes of the December 6, 2011 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes approved. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the December 6, 2011 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, are there any public comments? Okay, then the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any comments on the consent agenda? Then the chair,
I'm sorry, Maria. I'm trying to catch up. I'm sorry. Just, Kim, a quick question on the insurance. There's a refund that we get back. Why is there more money?
They sometimes decide they have, out of their loss fund, maybe some additional funds left. And so, like the prior year, they had offset the school board legal liability, and that's why those premiums were lower. This year, they just kind of did it in general. And it's really based on where, when they just look at back years and determine that, there isn't any more exposure to loss, then they will sometimes offset premium by that. And that's what they did again this year.
So is it year to year? So last year's, what they view to be surplus, then offsets this year?
Right, and it may go back several years. It depends on, it won't be just last year's. They'll go back several years and maybe close out like 2003 to 2005 or something like that. It's a very similar thing that they do on our workman's comp insurance.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
anything else?
Sorry.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, personnel recommendation. 2, renewal of SSCIP insurance agreement. 3, abatement of working cash funds. 4, approval of December 2011 expenditure report. And 5, ratification of November 2011 regular payroll.
So moved?
And we have a roll call, please.
Second.
Mary Kay Caparelli, yes. Dan Charleston?
Yes.
Marie Charlton?
Yes.
Shannon Hancock?
Yes.
Joel Price?
Yes.
Diane Thomas?
Yes.
Gary Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, the next item is the 5-year financial projections update.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Mike Francis from PMA. He's going to go through the presentation tonight. And the other thing, too, I just want to make sure everyone is aware, is this is a baseline model presented this evening based on assumptions that were similar to last year. There were some changes, and we can review those if we want to. But one of the things I just want to make sure that this is kind of the baseline assumption, and then we can run different scenarios off of this. So if we decide we are looking at, want to add FTE, we can plug that into the model and see what that impact does to next year and then the future years. If we project we're going to have a decrease in rental income because of moving the administration to south, that can be plugged in. There's lots of different things we can do to see what impact different types of expenditures or program adjustments will make to the baseline. But I just want to clarify, this is the baseline, and we didn't put in those assumptions at this point. And we will run those scenarios for you, and we can have those at the next meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Francis. I'm the Senior Financial Advisor of PMA Financial Network. Thanks for having me back again. What you should have in front of you.
Sir, excuse me,
Mike,
Mike?
can you go to the mic?
Oh, the mic, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
What you should have, is this,
Yes, thank you.
what you should have in front of you are two documents. One is a copy of the presentation that will be on the screens here. And the other one is the more detailed document that really shows you all the individual funds and the revenue and expenditure assumptions for each of the operating funds and all the different assumptions behind the model. But this overview we're going to give you tonight, because there's many, many pages in there, I think it's 60 or 70 pages long. To shorten that down, we've pared that down to more of an executive summary in aggregate for the total of your operating funds, and really still hitting the major assumptions that are driving the majority of your revenue and the majority of your expenditures. We do this through a program called the FPP, or the Financial Planning Program. The program was developed to help school districts in Illinois plan their finances based on their data and assumptions. We've been working with school districts for about 10 years using this model. I've been working in this particular district at least 5 years, I believe. And I think you're a longer client than that. And typically, we come out once a year to the school board to give an annual update and reassessment of where you ended the year and where you're going, what new path you're on. But I'll work with Kim throughout the year to make continual adjustments as some of the assumed information becomes actual, or plans that you're having from this point forward start to become action items later in the spring or towards the summer in the development of the 2013 budget. We'll continually update those projections. Here's just a few data elements that are included in the model. With you should have recently received your annual financial report or audit. And so we have 5 years of history, actual audit history in the model. There's actually an 11-year span, 5 years back, the current year, and then 5 years moving forward. The budget you've recently adopted, FY12 budget, is the base for the financial projections. And there's another list here, just some of the data elements that go into the model. Moving on to the revenue and the assumptions that are going to drive your property tax revenue. This pie chart shows you the 5 funds that we're looking at, the education, operation and maintenance, transportation, IMRF, and the tort fund, which make up the 5 district operating funds. Your current budget for revenue this fiscal year is just under $23.9 million. And you can see based on the pie how the revenue sources come into the school district, with about 81% come in the form of local property taxes. Another 7% come from other local sources or local classified revenue. You get about 8.2% from the state of Illinois and 4.2% from the federal government. So we're talking about the assumptions that are driving each of these pieces. Obviously, the biggest one is property taxes. And property taxes for school districts in the DuPage County are driven by, that are tax capped, are driven by 2 things, the consumer price index and the amount of new property that's added to the equalized assessed value on an annual basis. This bar chart shows you the CPI, the 5 years of history of the Consumer Price Index, where it is currently and what the projections are used in the model. The levy that was just approved this evening is using last year's CPI for this year to 2011 levy is that 1.5% figure you see towards the middle of the bar chart. That's going to be for taxes collected this coming June and September. The 3.2% figure that you see is the first assumption, and that's based on where this consumer price index is to date for the first 11 months of the 2011 calendar year. So if the CPI, which is given out as an index number on a monthly basis, if that index number does not change in the month of December, the CPI for the calendar year 2011 that's used for property tax cap in the property tax cap calculation will be 3.2%. This is one of those things that we will update and change as when we know that information, which will be right around Martin Luther King Day. So about a month from now, we'll have a final, which is going to be the number that's driving your 2012 levy for taxes collected in 2013.
Mike, on 3.2, so November's 3.2, is that November 11, is CPIU November 11 compared to CPIU, that basket, November 11 to November 10?
No, it's December to November. So it's the first 11 months, or it's actually January through November.
But it's cumulative, the CPI, in terms of,
Yeah, because it's
I always understood that the number that came out, that drove us,
Right.
was a December number. And-
It is.
and
So-
the December number, as I understood it, effectively, was just a December to December look as opposed to a cumulative look, so that you may have had inflationary spikes, for instance, in gas throughout
That's
the
right.
summer.
Sure.
$4.30 a gallon. But in December, it's $3.40.
Right.
So if it's December to December, I'm much less convinced of 3.2 than if it's cumulative, but I'm not sure how the cumulative piece would work.
Well, they give it to you normally two ways. One is a year over year, where it's November to November,
Yeah.
and then they'll give you the year-to-date number. And it's all based on an index comparing where the CPI, the index is based in a numerical format. And it starts with 100 back in like 1980. That was like the baseline. And every month, that index number changes. So it literally is, December can change, but it's based on what happens in December only. And it will change that index a little bit up or down, and the cumulative number will change. But on a normal month-to-month look, if you look at like the last 2 months, it's gone down.
Because last year, that 1.5, it was trending like 2.5 all year. And then,
Well, it didn't fall 1% in the last month.
no, November, December were big drops.
Well, they weren't a full percentage point, though. I mean, I do have all the history of the individual monthly pieces. On a monthly basis, the number typically, 95% of the time, changes less than 0.2%.
Okay.
Now,
So-
that being said, if you go back to 2008, when it fell 5% in 4 months, that's not always the case. I mean, it can change a full percentage point in a month.
So 3.2, is that a number that you're using in other clients for next year's assumptions then? For the most
Yes.
part? Yeah.
Yes, most of them are at the current rate, knowing that this year, the number has not been changing much on a monthly basis. We're not seeing huge increases or huge decreases, especially over the last 2 months. The last 2 months actually have been negative. In October, it fell 0.2, and in November, it fell 0.1. So if you wanted to be a little bit more conservative, I would say you could use like a 3. But to assume that it might fall to 2.5, I don't think there's any economist right now that's predicting that the CPI is going to be anywhere near lower than 3% at this point.
Okay.
However, it's a number that's, in my opinion, impossible to predict. So, and again, we'll have this updated in a month. We'll know the final number, which will be locked in, and we will update at that point, and we'll keep the board informed of what that change is. We actually have an inter-office pool on this number, and my guess is 3.1. So
like that.
I'm hedging a little bit down, and that was a guess from about 3 months ago, when it was 3.5.
You know, they say economists exist to give mediums credibility. I am more interested actually in the 2.5 going forward though, and interested in particular.
2.5 is what we've typically projected. It's the historical average of the consumer price index. If you look at 5, 10, 15 years, it's somewhere between 2.4 and 2.5 if you look at literally any average. It also is the mean point between the floor and the ceiling of what you could receive. If the CPI is 0 or negative, the minimum amount you could receive is 0, and the most you could ever receive is 5%. So even if the CPI was 8, you're limited under the tax cap law to 5. So not only is it the historical average, it's also the median of where you could actually receive taxes. So I personally think it's a good number to use for your projections. Now, I do have a few clients that are a little bit more conservative and use a slightly lower number. I used to have a client that used a higher number, but we typically don't have anybody else that uses much besides 2.5, but there are a few that use a number that's slightly lower.
And, you mentioned in a later slide that the variance, like in our case, a 1% difference. If we had a 1.5% event in 2013, like we did in 2011, the impact on us that year would be about $200,000.
$200,000, and that would be cumulative
To the
also.
negative, and then it compounds, because you lose it in
Absolutely.
2013, you lose it in 2014, you lose it in 2015 and forward.
Absolutely.
So, the risk in that 2.5 is that, the day you miss it, you don't just miss it once, you miss it forever, and it compounds.
There's another strategy that one client employs that I think is actually somewhat unique in looking at the history of the CPI, I think is somewhat valid. In a year like this year, where it's above 2.5, in the following year, they'll take the number more conservative. Because if you look at the history, it does seem to straddle that. You might get 2 years in a row lower, but then there'll be typically 2 years in a row higher. Again, if you look over 20 years, the average is 2.5, but it continually straddles that 2.5 line all the time. So in a year where it was 1.5, it's 3.2. Now, does that mean it will be lower than 2.5 next year? Possibly. That might be another strategy that you might want to look at, especially maybe if we have another year of data to do so. So especially because that's, it's affecting taxes a few years out, but it is closer than you might think in terms of how that could affect your financial projections. And any loss does compound in the aggregate base of your taxes moving forward.
So this 3.2 number is one that you feel pretty confident about as of right now?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's, I mean, it might change 1 or 2 tenths. And if a statistician, 2 standard deviations, it's not going to be more than 2 tenths of a change this month.
Okay.
It could be, but it's way beyond the norm.
Great, thank you.
By the way, I'll take the under.
You'll take the under on that?
I'll take the under.
The other piece that's added to your calculation is the value of new property that's added to your equalized assessed valuation on an annual basis. And here you see your actual new growth. Now, this is not the amount of the amount that you're receiving, but it's the amount of the value of the property that was added to the district's tax base. And like everywhere where we work, that number has really plummeted over the last 4 or 5 years as the economy has stalled and new kind of construction things have just not taken place. So those numbers have gone from of 18.6 million down to 3.02 in 2010, which are actuals. And then again, based on some estimates that Kim gets from the assessor, that value is going to be similar for 2011. And, you're going to have some new construction on an annual basis. $3 million is not a lot, unfortunately. But there's very conservative projections for that, and then hopefully a little bit of a turnaround into the future. The key, though, is really to focus on the next 1 to 3 years of assumptions. Obviously, because not only do you constantly update this, you'll have lots of time to reflect and act on any kind of changes that might be happening. Other local revenue, your CPPRT is the corporate personal property replacement tax. Currently, we're projecting it at $270,000 annually, which is the Department of Revenue comes out with an estimate each year, and their current estimate for CPPRT is $270,000, and we're projecting that flat moving forward. Your rate of return on investment income is 25 basis points, and then 10 points for next year, and then 10 points increase to that on an annual basis. And then all other local revenue is projected at its current 2012 budget levels.
So that includes food, vending, fees, all that other kind of stuff.
That's right. Again, the state and federal was about, I think, 10 to 12% of your total revenue budget. General state aid was 2 to 3%. General state aid is a very complex formula, but the summary of it is you need to watch on an annual basis what the General Assembly sets the foundation level at, which is they say is the minimum amount to funds needed to educate a child in Illinois. This is not the amount that you receive per child. You receive this amount minus what you typically receive locally, but you're providing more than that locally. So you're on what's known as the alternate formula. They still give you some general state aid, but not nearly as much as other districts that aren't providing it, that don't have as many local resources. The foundation level has been 6119 for the last 3 fiscal years, and this year it was only funded at 95%, which was a first time the General Assembly has done something like that, where they calculate which you're entitled to with that value and say, well, we can't afford that, we're only going to pay you 95% of it. So for the assumptions, because it's been flat for 3 years, we're holding that foundation level flat for the next 5 years and also funding it at its current 95% level. Now, that doesn't change your values very much because you're on the alternate formula funding model, and you're actually projected to go to flat grant funding for FY14. Flat grant means you provide more than 175% of the 6119 in local resources. So the state still provides you with $218 per average daily attendance. That's the minimum amount you could receive in general state aid. All other state categorical grants are projected flat. The main ones for you to be concerned with are special education and transportation reimbursements. There is one minor change in the federal revenue. It's about a $33,000 increase for your special education IDEA reimbursement, and we're projecting that at $500,000 annually. This bar chart shows you the general state aid projections. Again, they're not tremendously significant because you're on alternate formula. You actually have pretty stable general state aid, and it's been rising. Even with a 95% proration in 2012 budget year, you're at $697,000, and that will increase next year to $748,000. But once you hit that flat grant mode, that's when it falls off, and then you'll be more stable at about $600,000 to $650,000 is really the kind of the minimum your general state aid will be.
How at risk is the transportation reimbursements at this point going forward?
Oh, I mean, this year they actually paid us a little bit quicker than last year. But again,
Because that's what they cut last year.
Right, they're two payments behind. So, it's anybody's guess.
It is, and we're holding those values flat. The one I think most at risk is transportation. I think the governor will continually try to potentially prorate it more or cut it more and push that burden back onto the local school districts to provide those transportation, even though it's a state mandated program. So it is something that we'll have to watch. It has been cut the last 2 years, and it's quite a bit lower level than it has been if you go back to fiscal year '09. So we're holding it at the lower level, which is what the current appropriation is.
Right, and we're watching that closely. So, and we, adjusted the levy last year because of the way some of that was done in our audit, and so keeping a very close eye on that.
You mentioned the sensitivity analysis, which is important. If the CPI, every percentage change plus or minus to the assumption will be plus or minus $200,000 to your aggregate tax base. Now, that's just not a one-time loss or gain. It's a forever loss or gain if the CPI projection is off. And if the new property comes in a little bit faster, then we're assuming here you can get an additional $38,000 per million. So your downside on that, again, with a $3 million projection, the most you're going to lose is $3 million. The worst it could be is zero. I've never seen a district have zero in new growth, but that's the worst it could be. So you're talking about 3 times 38 is the worst case scenario for a new growth. That would affect, again, your aggregate base. Any other questions on revenue? If not, we'll move on to expenses. We're looking at the same 5 funds in this pie chart. Your aggregate operating budget for this year for your expenses is $24.3 million. Unlike the revenue pie charts, which really look different throughout the state and how states are funded, whether there's more local or more state resources, the expenditure sides are typically identical district to district, where the majority of your costs are in salary and benefits. The purchase service amounts might fluctuate a little bit based on what services you might have outsourced. If you have a bus, if you provide a company provides your transportation, or a food vending company provides your food service program, instead of having your own employees, that amount would fluctuate, would shift from purchase services to salary and/or benefits. We'll talk about what each of these are and what the projected the model is using for projections for these things. The biggest piece is salaries. For your teachers' salary assumptions, we're assuming a step increase only. And for your salary schedule, you don't have a uniform step increase. It ranges between 2.2 to 5% for each individual person that moves from, say, step 1 to step 2 or step 16 to step 17 in a variety of different education lanes. There's an exception for the retirement track employees. Anybody that signed up for a retirement program is receiving 6% annual increases until the year they retire. And anybody that's at the end of an education lane, you have a maximum number of steps. We're also providing that person that's in longevity on also a 2.2% projected increase. All other employees are projected at the Consumer Price Index for annual salary increases, and your health and dental insurance board contribution is projected to go up 10% annually.
So for all intents and purposes, the model, this presentation of this model effectively ties, the biggest component of our expenses, ties its growth to our revenue assumptions growth. Because our revenue driver really is CPI.
That's right.
So if we're assuming 2.5 in CPI, we're effectively assuming sort of 2.5 in the salaries component, which is the bulk of our stuff.
That's true. Now, I think the teacher's annual step increase is a little bit larger than that. If you just move everybody forward on step, when you're averaging between 2.2 and 5, I think it's about 3.1. Is that right?
About 3.15, somewhere right around there.
3.15 is what that step increase would be. On your other expenditures in the education fund for purchase services, supplies, and capital outlay, it's a 2.5% annual increase. Your special ed tuition, which is in that other object piece of the pie, is projected at 8%. In the O&M fund, also 2.5% for purchase services and supplies, and no increase for capital outlay. Transportation fund expenses are projected at 3.5%, and the tort fund at 3% annually. We're not projecting any changes in staff, more of a status quo assumption. This is what your projections look like if you employ the same number of people. This particular bar chart shows you your certified staff, excluding an administration. You have 114.6 full-time equivalent teaching staff, and we're projecting that level of salaries or the level of employees in the future. Finally, some other assumptions, no changes in school funding, and this one, I always was wondering, why do we have this? This is not going to change school funding. There might be some kind of change in school funding in the next couple of years, especially in the general state aid formula, even though that hopefully won't affect you very much, as long as they continue to provide alternate formula or flat grant districts with some sort of funding. I think your biggest concern would be that the state would look at that and saying, you're already providing more than the foundation level locally, and they might cut that further. That would be my biggest concern there. But there really needs to be a change in this general state aid formula. It just doesn't work any longer for those foundation level school districts. There's no change to the tax cap law. We're assuming that CPI increase to your revenue on an annual basis. So not only Representative Franks had a bill a few months ago that didn't pass that would limit that increase to 0% in a declining EAV situation. You've had, and you'll continue to have declining EAV probably for the next couple of years. And if that were to resurface, you could really lose a lot of additional tax revenue moving forward if something like that were to happen. We're also assuming that the board would continue to pass a levy high enough to capture that CPI on an annual basis. That's the assumption in the model. You have 18 known retirements over the next 3 years, and those are salary savings that we're projecting. Those teachers come off the salary schedule in the year of retirement, and they're replaced with an average salary in the master's lane, step 5, which is about $59,000. And then finally, your current 12 budget is the basis for the projections. And while we can reconcile most of your revenue items for reasonableness, your expenses have to be reasonable also. And if you don't spend part of your budget, obviously those expenses might not need to carry forward also and would have a compounding effect on an annual basis. What that looks like in numbers, again, this is the aggregate look of the same operating funds. The first column is your current year budget. And we talked about the revenues at the top, local, state, and federal, $23.9 million. Expenditures, $24.3 million. You've got a current budgeted deficit of about $446,000 in the current fiscal year. You've got to transfer in, if you follow that down, $829,000 transfer in and then out. That's dollars that are coming from the working cash fund, flowing through the operation and maintenance fund, and then flowing back out into the site and construction fund for capital projects. Your audited beginning fund balance is just over $13 million. And again, if your budget comes in as budgeted, that fund balance would fall to about $12.6 million, or just under 52% of annual expenditures. The most important column is the next one. What does next year look like? Next year, you can see the growth in local, state, and federal revenue. Your revenue is projected to grow about 3.25%, up to $24.6 million. Expenditures are going to grow at just almost the same level, a little bit less, 3.13%, based on the assumptions. And your projected deficit basically remains the same. You still have it doesn't erase what's known as a structural deficit. You still have a deficit in place that you can, if you follow that to the right, will continue on an annual basis. Actually gets a little bit lower, but never goes away, and actually gets higher towards the end of the projections. What that means, it would continually, you'd be using fund balance on an annual basis to support that deficit, and your fund balance would fall from its current state, about $13 million, to about $10 million over a 5-year period.
What's driving it higher at the very end there? Excuse me.
What's driving it
What's
higher?
driving it higher from 562,000 to 891,000?
Part of this, there's probably multiple things. The things I could think off the top of my head are, we only have retirements through, I think, FY15, people that are known. And so what we have some salary costs in 16 and 17, and if somebody were to sign up for retirement this year or say next year, and we know they were going to leave in 16 or 17, there would be some kind of savings. Those savings for the 18 people we know are leaving in the next 3 years are already built in.
Okay.
There is no salary savings for any retirees in 16 and 17. That would be a piece of the increase in the annual deficit.
Then on the other side, the PMA doesn't, where we're seeing those 18 people over the course of the next
Right.
3 years. It also is not showing the replacement, correct?
No, they're being replaced.
Yeah.
They're being replaced. On the previous slide, it said, on the third bullet point on page 15, it says, includes the known retirements with replacement teachers hired at the MA Step 5, which is 58,000. So those people are being replaced. So your total FTE is staying the same, but you're replacing a high salary with a lower salary, and you're actually capturing those savings in that year.
Okay.
So, and those replacements are being captured in the model.
They are.
So, so in terms of just the numbers in the spreadsheet, these negatives, you mentioned the word structural, and we've talked a lot about what's structural at different other meetings. And it sort of gets to this point of how deficits get bigger, because this model effectively, we mentioned, predicates effectively tying our costs, the growth in our costs, tying them to the growth in our revenue.
Right.
But if we start that process with more expenses than revenue, the growth of the expenses is still going to outstrip the growth of the revenue.
That's right.
So it just gets bigger because it's structural, and the numbers, even if you can just grow, the total revenue and total expenses by the same number, total expenses grows faster. The deficit gets bigger. It just happens that way. But if there's, the challenge feels like, really what you're doing is putting a challenge to us. Because we have to manage expenses to those revenues.
That's
And if
right.
we
That's
don't-
really what this is about, is
And
to
if we
show
don't,
you.
and if we don't get lucky, or I should say, if that 2.5 on CPI that drives revenue,
Right.
if we get hit there once, twice, we got to find that too, because that's something we can never catch back up. We just can never catch that back up in revenue.
That's right.
I'd like to say that in looking at this, in the past, when we have looked at PMA numbers and stuff, there is a deficit here, but they were worse in the past.
They were much worse in the
Were
past.
much worse. They were much worse.
And
So
Marie,
I just want to say that I appreciate what is being done to hold costs.
right, and that's one of the things that's really important to note
Yes.
is, in prior years, we had projected level staffing, but at 120.6, we
Right.
cut staff by 6 FTE this year.
Right.
That has a huge impact
Right.
on all of these numbers going forward. If that had been 120 still this year, this model would look significantly
Right.
different. So any time we can make changes to our costs for our employees, because those are almost, 75% of our expenditures, that's a big impact and it's long lasting. Again, we've had, over the past years, the board has made cuts over the past several years, and we're starting to feel some of the cumulative effects as well. The other thing, though, as a board and as a district, we have to be aware, while this looks good, we need to really focus in on what else we need to do to reduce the deficit. And if we have some choices, just like you do in your personal budget, I have $10 today and I want to spend 15, I want to do something else and I only have $10, I've got to figure out what I have to give up to be able to maintain that level. So again, as we're looking at things we want to do for the budget for next year, we may have to look at trade-offs and again, what can we do to further bring these deficits down?
But I just really wanted to take a minute and comment on that these numbers look dramatically different than what they have looked in the past.
Right,
And
yeah.
I, for one, am very appreciative to see that, there were terms being used before as we were like bleeding and stuff. And I would like to say, just from paying attention to what is going on
Well, and again, I think,
throughout the county.
6 FTE at over $100,000 apiece, that's, and then plus benefits, that's a substantial. So you would have had $1 million deficits going forward had those things not been happening.
Yeah,
And clearly, our work is not done.
Right.
I'm not insinuating that in any way, shape, or form, and I know that there's a lot of work being done looking at further budgets and
Right.
expenses and that, but I just have to say that, these figures are so much better than they were in the past, and I appreciate seeing
Just
that.
my recollection, though, we're still bleeding a little bit. We're not bleeding as profusely as we were, but I guess the question is, it doesn't necessarily feel like a fair comparison to prior models, because in prior models, we also generally incorporated raises on base.
We
At least in the
did
out
in
years.
prior,
In the out years.
in the model that I worked off for the budget
The
for
3,
last
4,
year
and
when
the
I
3,
came,
4,
yeah.
5 year.
But one of the things too, I did do a comparison of what we had presented even last year. Last year, we had FY '13, and the same for this year. Salaries for teachers was step, so FY '13 for both. And then in 14 and 6 through 16, last year we did put 2% on base, and this year we did not. So that is, that's why the model would look worse last year. But again, being fiscally responsible, when we're projecting revenues to be 2.5% increases, and already STEP is 2.2 to 5% for our employees, we, to go beyond that, to put something on base is to go beyond the revenue that the district's going to receive. And so that's, a philosophy shift for the district. And that's, that's something that, we feel needs to be done. And, if we do something different, then obviously this model looks significantly different. We can run scenarios with something on base and then give increases to all of our other union employees. The other thing is when we're projecting out in future years, and this is a pretty unusual circumstance, again, last year when we did the budget, we didn't know what our teacher salaries would be. When we're going to do the budget for next year, we still haven't settled the custodial union contract, so we don't know really even what their salaries are for this year, let alone next year. And we have both WESPA and the WTA for next year. So we can't even base these models off of known increases.
Again, I just would like to say that I appreciate that we are talking about fiscal responsibility and looking at expenditures, and we still certainly have work to do.
And the majority of the changes from the action that the administration and the board has taken, because that's the thing that you can control is expenditures, and you've done that in the variety of things that we're talking about. The revenue did come in a little bit, if the CPI comes in at 3.2, that's helpful, because last year we were projecting this year's CPI to be 2.5. But you saw the sensitivity on that. It's not, that did not balance your budget, or that did not help the deficit all that much. It did help, obviously, but the other things that you've done cut that future deficits much more than anything on the revenue side.
And as we start looking at budget and planning scenarios, we'll know in another month what that CPI is, but even as we start looking at things now, we can budget, a $200,000 swing in there as well. So if that CPI comes in a 1% less, we're going to have a $630,000 deficit. So what else might we need to do to further cut by that extra 200,000. So we can, build those things. Again, this is a baseline, and now we can look at what movements in different factors will do to that baseline.
Thank you.
I think I have one last slide, is the 11-year chart that shows you the individual funds and the aggregate look of, again, the 5 operating funds. And not only shows you where you're at currently and moving forward, but it shows you a 5-year history also. And that red line that you see along the top runs along the axis at the top, 2007 through 2017. That's the aggregate fund balance on June 30th, actual from 2007 through 2011, and then budgeted in 12, and then projected based on those, the $200,000 to $700,000 or $800,000 annual deficits, how that would fall, slightly decline on an annual basis. The blue line is what we're trying to represent as an estimate in terms of your low point in cash. Again, the red line is a June 30th number, and that's inclusive of the June taxes that you would have just received that month. If you back those out, as well as expenditures that you'd have in June, the district's low point in cash is typically on the end of May. So we want to show you, we want to represent, even though you have a fund balance of, $10 to $13 million in the projections, what's your low point in cash? Do you have enough fund balance to make it through until those June taxes come in? And in this particular model, you'd be coming really close to running out of cash in 2017 on that low point, but you would not have to issue any tax anticipation warrants. That's what that's trying to model here. Okay, that is the last, any other questions? Be happy to answer.
Well, this certainly gives us, a bullet point look at where we are right now. And obviously, it is a look right now, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, then the next item is the presentation of monthly financial statements.
Let's see, there's not too much different from last month. The state owes the district $323,000. We received a November tax distribution of a little over $250,000. So total collections in all funds to date is $19.9 million, and that's a 97.69% collection rate. Last year at this time, we had collected 97.26%.
Is it your sense that that difference, the .4, is that timing?
It's timing,
Okay.
yeah. And we've had typically about, the total collection rate has actually changed. It fluctuates quite a bit here. So somewhere between 99.3 and 99.7. So we'll get another we got another distribution in December already, so, and I don't remember what that was at, but we're getting close. And the education and tort funds, again, revenues are comparable to prior years. The state still owes us $214,000 for this year. And again, same scenario we've been operating under for the past 2 years. And the operations and maintenance and life safety funds, revenues are comparable to the prior year, a little bit higher than the 3-year average. And again, some of this is the result of the timing of rental income from year to year, and then the budgeting of interest income and transfers in prior years. And transportation fund, those variances continue to be greater than normal. Again, this is attributed to the timing of state payments. This year, they paid things a little bit sooner. I mean, that's just fluctuating all over the place. And the state's vouchered $109,000 of payments that haven't been released to the district to date. Expenditures in the ed and tort funds, they're comparable to last year and the prior 3-year average. And then in the operations and maintenance and fire prevention and safety fund, again, these expenditures are higher than they have been in the past, but that's really because we spent funds out of life safety this year. So O&M is 34.31% spent to date, and that's comparable to last year at this time. And then the fire prevention and safety fund is 93.04% spent, and that was for the summer projects that we did. And then again, the variances in the transportation fund, are all over the place, again, because of timing of payments, and we still had not made in November our payments for the athletic and field trips. We did finally get the revised invoices, and they were paid this month in the bills that you saw. In terms of investment schedule, is there for your review, as well as fund balance and the liability accounts for student activities. And then in terms of the lunch program, while we still have expenditures exceeding revenues this year, we are trending in a more positive direction, and we're not quite as heavily negative as we have been in the past, and we continue to look for ways to improve that as well. Does anyone have any questions?
No, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a resolution to adopt the 2011 tax levy.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, could you pause?
The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution setting the 2011 tax levy as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
And yes, Mrs. Caparelli.
Okay, the next item is the resolution of intent to issue $5 million working cash fund bonds.
And what I just wanted to do, we've had a couple different meetings about this issue, and a lot of it started with the premise that we wanted to do something with our facilities, a short-range, mid-range, and long-range plan. And so what I wanted to do prior to the board having their discussion and taking action is just to kind of bring together all these discussions, and then also the memo that I'll be reviewing right now we'll make available. We'll attach it to our board book, make that public so that everybody can see it as well. But basically, the recommendation of the board is for the administration is for the board to adopt a resolution allowing for the issuance of up to $5 million in working cash bonds. And by no means does that mean that you have to issue the full amount, but rather we know that all of our projects that we're considering right now, the high end would be $5 million. And so this allows us to go to that point if necessary. With those funds, the projects that are being proposed for Manning Elementary, we'd be relocating the District 201 offices from Manning to South Elementary. That would allow the creation of a new computer lab, remodeling of the media center, and that's the space that currently is occupied by the superintendent's office and business manager's office. The existing business office would be developed into a new classroom. We'd be able to renovate two of what were at one time science labs when the building was a junior high. Those would be renovated into two larger classrooms. And then we would be able to renovate the First Start Kindergarten for a possible new classroom if we decided to go that direction. There was also discussion of temporary window units for the building, and then also to create dedicated space for service providers for our students. In the Miller Elementary, what we're proposing is a relocation of the Library Media Center and create a new kindergarten space, renovate the first floor west wing into a Library Media Center and possible kindergarten, and then a new computer lab would be integrated into the Learning Media Center, renovate the existing library into a faculty workroom lounge, and then again the temporary window units. South Elementary, we are again relocating the administration to South, and then also looking at the possibility of developing an early childhood center at South Elementary as well. At Westmont High School, there's a desire. It's again, the floor plan is an open classroom concept from the mid-'70s, and that right now we're able to accommodate our students, but going forward in the future, that can be problematic using those open spaces. And so the initial phase is to install windows in the classroom. Again, when the building was built, there was not a lot of natural light considered. And then as we move into the future in our long-range planning, we would continue that process of enclosing those spaces. And again, as what's been noted at our previous meeting, at this point, we've given Steve Cashman, our architect, authorization to develop the plans, develop some costs for us to look at. But the board at this point has just reached consensus on exploring these possibilities. But there would have to be that formal process of approving the projects and then approving bids and going through that process. And as Shannon pointed out, we need to bring back to the board concrete dates when we can expect those numbers from Steve. The other things to consider, again, the whole idea here is to take and improve our learning environments for our students, and what's being proposed for short range does that for us. It definitely, for all of our buildings, we improve the learning environment for our students. The reason why we're recommending the non-referendum approach and issuing working cash bonds, again, is number one, we have sufficient bonding capacity, and not only to do this project, but also allows us additional capacity if there's any unforeseen emergency in the future. It would be in the time frame we're looking at, because the desire is to get some of this work done in time for the fall of 2012. Referendum campaigns typically take a longer time, and so in the tight window, that becomes problematic. We also acknowledge the fact that going forward, when you're looking at the cost of potential mid-range and long-range projects, we probably will need to go to the community to support those capital development projects through a referendum. And then also, as we're looking at when Mike Francis provided us with the 5-year projections for our district, depending upon some of those assumptions that we're making and what happens with the economy, those types of things, the hope is that through continued cost containment and looking at how we do business, we're able to continue to close that gap between revenues and expenditures. But if we're faced with a challenge where that's no longer possible and that fund balance continues to dwindle, we may have to go to the community for a tax rate increase. And, how many times can you go to your community for an election and asking for a yes vote? And so we're considering all those issues when we're making this recommendation. Some of the things that the board should be aware of is that definitely right now we do have some bonds that we're paying off. In this issuance, we do roll that out for further tax years, and it would extend it from tax year 2015 to 2019. The current schedule that was proposed by Liz Hennessy, it does increase our bond and interest by 0.02 cents per $100. And again, she did send out additional information. Is it possible to restructure things and to kind of hold your bond and interest rate constant? Yes, there is, but again, it's not like that means that there's no cost to the taxpayer. It just means that we're going to roll out that debt longer, and if it's a concern about us tying up our debt service extension, then I think we don't necessarily want to go that direction. Also, there's additional fees and costs involved in that as well. So it is a minimum increase compared to the benefit that we're going to see with our teaching environments for our buildings. And the other thing I can mention as well, we passed our tax levy. Our taxpayers will see one tax rate on their tax bill, and it's a combination operating rate and bond and interest rate. Most people don't realize that there are those two elements that go into that one tax rate. The action that the board is taking with our operating rate, that's what you approved, that actually has a greater impact on tax rates and taxes than the bond and interest portion of the tax bill. And so again, when you kind of roll those all things together, I still think that the working cash bonds are the direction to go. And again, I mentioned in there, depending upon what happens with EAV and CPI, those are two things that we project. Again, the rate can change depending upon what happens with those. The other thing that this does for us, as you know, we're awarded a capital development grant, matching grant, 1/3 the state pays, 2/3 we pay, and you have to have a revenue stream for that. And so if we issue the working cash bonds, now we do have a revenue stream for that. If you don't pass if we don't do the working cash bonds, then we're still left with, okay, how do we come up with our 2/3 of the cost? And one way would be out of your operating rate or your operating funds, but again, as Kim pointed out, the projections are based upon certain assumptions. And again, if we're trying to protect our operating rate, minimize the dependence on it for things like capital development, then again, the issuance of the bonds makes the most sense for us at this time. So that in a nutshell. Yes, Shannon?
I just have a couple
Sure.
basic questions. The very last bullet point you just covered, there's a date by which we have to use that grant. Can you remind me what that is?
Well, the dates, we have to decide on our projects by the summer,
Summer, okay.
But in terms of then, once you make the commitment and lock in on the projects, then you have 3 years in which to utilize or the way it works is first you have to spend the money and then the state reimburses you. So over that 3-year period, we have to be spending the money in order to get that reimbursement.
My second question on the same bullet point is it says there that grant is for projects at our elementary buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So we're essentially saying then we have $3.6 million of projects at the elementary buildings.
Well, basically, the original projects, and I think we've had conversations about this, the original projects were for security, life safety, those types of projects. And so there were actually some things that we have already done in terms, if you remember, we improved our alarm system for fire protection. We improved that. That would be something that we would then be able to put towards that project. So I think what you're getting at, definitely what we're currently proposing in these projects won't necessarily do all those things for us. But then if you remember at our mid-range list, and this is where we get into, okay, which of those mid-range projects do we pull in? We talked about the fact that the way that our current elementary buildings are set up in terms of parents are, people are buzzed in, but the office is away from that entrance. And that is something that we want to correct. And so some of those other projects we would be able to pull in then into that mid-range and look at that list. And Mike Maros has been going through that list to kind of earmark what he would prioritize from that mid-range list for us as well. So definitely we would be looking at all those projects so that we can take full advantage of what the state is affording us.
One more question,
Sure.
same bullet point. Does the state consider South School an elementary building now or not?
They have said that they would be willing to allow us to look at Miller and Manning, that the work doesn't only have to be done at South.
No, but
So-
I mean, do they consider South School an elementary building?
Right now, I'd have to check to see. We didn't decommission the building,
Okay.
okay? So I think technically it's considered
So the
an
work
elementary
we did there
school.
this summer can also be part of this?
Right.
I think if I remember from the letter that we had, it said South School in Manning, but we had asked to have all
Right.
the elementary buildings put into that, if I remember from that letter.
Right.
Okay.
Did you have anything else, Kevin? Did you have anything else?
No, that's,
Okay, are there any comments before we move on?
So I just want to be clear, because I was looking at the new thing that Liz sent out today. And so basically that takes out the CPI growth in our bond funding over this issuance, I guess. And so that's why the dollar amount stays flat and it goes out an extra year.
Which page are you
I'm sorry,
talking
it's
about?
page 7, without the CPI. So under that scenario,
Right, that scenario is keeping your debt service level.
but when I
You-
added up the
Right.
dollar amounts from both versions, this version actually costs a little bit more in dollar amounts because you've got the extra year tacked on the back end.
Correct. You can structure the debt service really how much you want to. You can utilize the full change in the debt service extension base, which is what the first proposal was doing, or you could not utilize it and keep a level debt service, so keep a debt service payment similar to what we've been paying with the issuance of the 2007 bonds. And so by doing that, you increase your debt service payments by an additional year.
And so historically, those payments have always gone up a little bit. Is that, I mean, we only
Yeah,
go
they're
back
just,
2010
yeah. I mean,
here, so-
well, one year they were up, 3,000, one year they're down, they're kind of all in the same.
It's number of days interest.
Yeah,
It's
so
not,
it's
it's
not-
actually, it's
yeah.
actually level, it's level debt service, but it's actual days calculation.
Correct me, didn't you say you didn't recommend that version necessarily?
Right, because of it extending it, our recommendation is, the original schedule paid it off quickly. And then again, allows you flexibility for, in the event that you have other need for that bonding capacity. And then also, depending upon what happens with mid-range, long-range projects, if you're not successful going to your community, it'll take you longer, but you can continue to work on those projects if you have access to that bonding capacity.
Did you have anything else, Joel?
No, I just, the total dollar amount difference that I calculated was about $153,000. It cost more to go the other route, so I wouldn't be in favor of that.
I have a question on this information. It says here, it should also be noted that the interest rates have fallen approximately 50 basis points since the scenarios were run in November.
Right, but again, they could go back
Right.
up. So, I
Right.
mean, right now, and that's what that December 16th presentation was based on, was a little bit lower interest rate.
I'd like to pass along my thanks to Liz for doing this analysis. The side-by-side, I think, was helpful. The reality is that there's no free lunch. If you borrow $5 million, you have to pay it back. But it's the same conversation that the board last had, the board for 201 last had in 2007 when they issued bonds. They issued bonds that had an 8-year payment schedule attached to it, or 10-year payment schedule attached to it, including the first 2 tax years. So it's part of our district economics to utilize this bond and interest levy. The reality is that, while this is a small tax increase, to do it this way, it's funding. The difference, I think, for me, I've stated out loud my preference to approach this as a referendum question. I think it's more transparent, just with taxpayers. And even non-referendum issue is a small tax increase. But, I've putting together, in particular, the arguments for doing it this way are simply, in my mind, this. The projects we're looking at right now are now. They're now projects. They're need projects. They're not want projects. They're need projects. They're projects that 2 facilities committees have endorsed and talked about for quite a while. The financing for those, because we want to do them now, we want to do them in particular this summer and into next year, the financing for those needs to be certain. Otherwise, we're going to be delayed. And in fairness, that would be a very terrible shame to do that. And while I prefer the referendum choice, Kevin's arguments about why we do the non-referendum option at this point, even in light of a small tax increase, are compelling. And so, I'll defer to him and to them and to the administration on that. And just as importantly, even though I've stated my preference, I also want to state that this is important enough that it shouldn't be a divided vote. I won't divide it. I'll support the action of this board.
Anyone else?
The only thing I would just say is that there's a couple of ways of looking at that. I mean, to me, looking over all these numbers, I look at it more as a continuance of what we've been doing, so a tax continuance as opposed to an increase. In the end, yes, you're paying more years, but you're also getting more dollars to benefit our students.
Joel, there actually is a tax increase. It's small.
Dan, Joel's speaking now.
Again, Dan, it's a matter of how you look at it, in my opinion. I'm talking about, yes, it extends it out, and you pay more on the back. And, you can argue over semantics, but I prefer not to. I think we've got a lot of opportunities here with the projects we're funding. I'm particularly excited about the early childhood programming and those options, because I think in the long run, having a solid and expanded early childhood program down the road will lead to financial benefits for our district and the ability to serve our students more effectively. And, the earlier we get kids in, we get issues identified, and we get services to them, the less money it costs us in the long run. And, that stands true not only for their school life through graduation, but long into adulthood. There's numerous studies out there showing the benefits in a longitudinal way of early childhood impacting the lives of students socioeconomically well beyond graduation. So I think it's a commitment, and I think it's a little bit of a philosophy that we're not just looking at how much things cost us as a district, but on a larger scale, we're looking at the benefits of children who achieve a higher status in life because they were given this opportunity well down the road. And I think that's kind of a philosophical view on my part. So, very excited about that, and I hope we're able to do what we're setting out to do. That's my comments.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I just feel that the whole process has been out and engaging with the community. It's been, I think, almost overly transparent sometimes. We had several facility committee meetings, myself, other board members, members of the community, members of the administration attended these meetings. They presented the board with options. We had a finance committee meeting in August where we had a professional come before us with options for funding these different scenarios. We had another meeting on November 8th, I believe it was, where in front of the full board here, where this person came back, this professional came back and reviewed these options with us again. We talked about it at the last meeting. We've talked about it at this meeting. I just think that there's been plenty of information out there for the community to participate and to understand what's going on. And I really look forward to improving our schools. I think that's the biggest thing that we're doing here is we're creating better educational spaces for our students. And I'm very excited to be a part of that. And hopefully we can move forward tonight and get these projects rolling.
I'd like to echo what Gary just said with regard to the transparency of this process. I think, again, it was more than a little transparent. I think we went over and above to make sure that the community had a part in this process. And I think we did that very, very well. We have an obligation to make sure our children, the children of this community, have a sound academic footing, and we have an obligation to maintain the assets of this community. We can't just decide to not do it because we're hemorrhaging or we're bleeding or, this is a very, very common district financial transaction, very common. And I think this is the most responsible way to fulfill our obligations. I'm also not willing to turn my back on $1.2 million from the government.
Anyone else? Okay. I then would say that first I would like to sincerely thank Kim, Kevin, and Liz Hennessy for giving us all the information and time to clarify this bond issue for us. As a board member, I rely on the experts to give us this information because we must do our job in the most fiscally responsible way, as we've talked about. And the other thing that I'd like to think is that I like thinking in terms of long-term, and the original bond issuance achieves our district's needs. One of the things we've talked about was random acts of improvements versus focus on district vision, and I think what we're looking at here does focus on our district vision. There have been numerous, again, echoing what we've said, numerous discussions over and over and over about the issue that we're looking at, and I would strongly support making sure that our facilities are ready for our students, and I think this does do that. So Not hearing anything else, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution of intent to issue the $5 million working cash fund bonds as presented.
So
Marie,
moved.
I'm sorry, just the actual wording in the resolution is up to $5 million, not issue $5 million.
Up to.
Up to.
Right, in the actual resolution wording versus on our agenda, that was
Right,
missing.
up to.
Thank you.
So moved.
Sorry.
Second?
And a roll call, please, Ms. Cabral.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Absolutely, yes.
Mrs. Caparelli, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment here, though. I look forward to Mr. Cashman's dates, and our work isn't done. We need to keep moving on our mid and long-term range goals and figure out how we're going to do that.
Agreed.
Okay, then the resolution is passed. Superintendent's report, please.
Since our last meeting, we had a climate committee meeting, and one of the things that was discussed was issuing the student survey, getting that out and getting that data and feedback from the students. So we're making a commitment to do that. As soon as our students return from their winter break, we'll distribute those surveys and bring that data back to the climate committee. And again, the goal there is to work with that group to start developing resources that can be utilized by parents and by teachers in our classrooms to help impact our climate in a positive way.
Okay, great. Are there any board reports?
I just have one item. Today, on the high school's website, they put out a survey for past students, graduating students, to get some feedback to them so that we can figure out what we're doing well in the school facility and what could use to be improved upon for their next step, whether it be college or trade school or whatever they go to. So I guess it's a request I would make that any parents out there that know students that have graduated, please get the survey into their hands or have them go to the high school website so that they could take the survey. I think it's only about 10 or 12 questions long, right, Mr. Carr? So it's very easy. I took a look at it today, but it would really be helpful to the district to help us give us some direction. So anybody out there, please take the survey if you graduated from CUSD 201.
Marie.
Kevin, I have a request, because I actually had a couple, people ask me about this, but, and Steve, I see you're still in the room. By the way, I love the goatee. The finals this year are obviously before break, and so would love to, at some point, maybe as we're doing calendar for next year, just talk about feedback you get from that.
Sure. We can do that.
And both at the staff level and students, and just, just to have a sense for sort of how we feel like that went. Sure.
Marie, just a quick item. I just wanted to recognize there's been some excitement going on in the Miller Building. We had a couple of families that approached the principal and asked to put together a food drive to benefit the People's Resource Center. And we're very, very fortunate that those families, not part of the PTO, just a couple of random families got together. And tomorrow's the final day of collection, and there are a couple of administrators and a couple of students that are going to be able to go over to the Resource Center and deliver all the collections that we've made. And it's been a lot of excitement in the building. I've been in the building a couple mornings, and different students have been on the loudspeaker system announcing and writing their own little announcements, and it's been something that everybody in the building could get behind. And I thought particularly nice because it wasn't the couple of PTO people or the principal or it was just somebody completely different that just stepped up and thought it was a good idea and took the initiative. And it's just a fun thing that's been going on. The kids have really been involved every morning and looking in the boxes in their rooms and counting how much was there, and something fun.
I just have two things. I would like to say two things. The arts in our community are alive and well, and I would like to just comment on two things. First, on December 7th, there was a winter concert and art exhibition at the high school, and it was a phenomenal experience. Beautiful music, beautiful singing, and beautiful artwork. And I was overwhelmed at how so many people talked about the amount of students that are involved in our fine arts program. So I would like to just say I'm very proud to be part of a community that's surrounds it, gives so much emphasis on its arts. And also, to that extent, had the joy of this weekend of attending the Progressive Village presentation on Miracle on 34th Street. If you didn't get a chance to hear about this, it was a live radio experience based on the movie. It will be presented on the radio. It was presented as a radio show. And there were a number of our district students involved in this, elementary and high school, and our madrigals sang. And it was a very, very, very wonderful addition to see our students also involved in this new theater group that is happening in our district. So that's a great part to see. Last, or at least the one last thing I would like to say, and I just want to make sure that, because I think there have been some things stated towards, particularly towards the leadership of the board, and there have been some allegations that the board is not open and transparent. And those terms have been thrown around rather loosely. I would like to say, for the record, that there has never been a Board of Education or an administration that is more open than what we have right now. All of our regularly scheduled board meetings are televised live and shown via our website for playback at any time. At every meeting, there are 2 times for public comments. All of the public documents are available online before every meeting, and before every meeting, there are posted that the meeting is happening, and now blogs that are going out via email. There have been numerous meetings over the past 2 years on many topics. And everyone's comments have been heard and listened to over and over and over again. So from where I sit as a chair, I would like to state that everything that we are doing here is open, it is transparent, and before any decision is ever made, it is looked at from a number of different avenues, and everyone's voice is heard. So I hope we agree that the democratic process is alive and well in District 201.
Marie, I'd also like to add, I mean, just in reference to the last meeting that was at Manning, my understanding from when the meeting was set up is that it was really going to be brief. Now, if somebody felt that the conversation was going to be that extensive or that in-depth, or that they could have made the suggestion to you and to Kevin that maybe we need to organize this meeting to have on TV because it's that important. We also had follow-up opportunity tonight for anyone to say anything on TV to our community concerning what was, discussed. But as far as what I was anticipating going into that meeting, I was not anticipating the lively discussion that did occur. And we certainly could have had that again tonight. And, frankly, I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I think it's been a number of things have gone over and gone over and gone over. But, I think it's our obligation as board members that if we expect a meeting is going to be that important, that we really highlight to you. And I'm assuming that no one did that or made that request of you. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that.
Okay, so I'd just like to respond briefly and say that I think the point that Dan was trying to make in the beginning was a little bit drowned out. And regardless of the last meeting particularly, the comments that you just made are an important part of what this board is trying to accomplish. And the fact that we did have a meeting that went completely unrecorded, I just think is something we should strive to avoid, regardless of whether we think it's going to be something, not be something. I mean, we don't really know until we get there, or discussion ensues that it may turn into something more, or more information may come out. So regardless of last meeting, just generally speaking, I think we should strive not to have a meeting, a public open meeting take place where there isn't some kind of electronic record, because that is something, as you just pointed out, that we're making a lot of effort to continue to be connected. So I just want to say that I think it's important that we strive going forward, not to have that happen, generally speaking.
And I guess I'll ask the question then, is it incumbent on board members generally to check in and make sure that all important meetings are going to be broadcast or recorded? Is that incumbent on board members?
I think it's incumbent on board members to understand board business. Board business is that we have regularly scheduled meetings that are set up that were set up months ago, and everyone is aware of that. And from time to time, there are special board meetings. And so to have the
I asked a
allegation,
simple
let me
question.
finish. I'm saying to have an allegation is in.
No one made an allegation. I made some statements, but no one made allegations of anything.
Okay.
I said that last one wasn't recorded. Fact. And I didn't think that was appropriate. That was my opinion. That's not an allegation of anything. It's an expression of fact and an expression of opinion, right? Having said that, on special meetings, is it incumbent on board members to check in to make sure that things are going to be recorded and/or broadcast?
It is certainly your role as a board member to ask questions.
Where in either policy or practice has that ever happened before?
No one has ever launched the allegation that we are not being open and
Again, allegation.
transparent.
No, it wasn't allegation. A statement of fact, statement of opinion. It's not about allegation. It's not about, Marie, it's not about allegation. It's not about hyperbole. It's about the fact that there was a meeting that was important that had an hour and a half worth of discussion that there is no recorded record of. I think that's not good, and that shouldn't happen again, and that's what I said.
You did say that, but I will.
That's the extent of what I said.
And I know you would like to stop.
That's the extent of what I said.
Okay. What I'm saying is that
And
from
no
this chair.
other words in my mouth.
Fine. From this chair, I would like to stop seeing the words open and transparent tossed around like they're not important, because they are. So what I'm saying.
They're words everybody uses all the time whenever when they feel like they want to pat themselves on the back.
Correct. Or when they want to say things that are not fair. So
No,
what I'm
that's-
saying
no.
is, there have
You
been
can't have that both ways.
There
Marie, you
have
can't
been.
have that both ways.
Are you finished?
You know what? Are you finished?
No.
No, because here's the thing. I mean, part of our thing is we welcome these exchanges, right?
Correct.
Good. I'm glad.
Great.
Good.
So what I'm saying is that when we have special meetings that are not on the scheduled agenda, there is nothing inherently wrong with having a special meeting.
No, and I didn't say that.
Right.
Right?
Right. And we have
So
all of these
why
meetings.
are you asserting that?
You know why I'm asserting it.
I didn't suggest it was wrong to have the special meeting.
All right. What I'm saying is that there was nothing untoward going on in the district. And it was stated in public comment, and it was stated.
I didn't state
at
that
this
the
meeting.
outcome of the meeting was untoward. I said it should have been recorded.
Correct. We heard you. What
Okay,
I'm saying
but you're
is-
going a whole different direction with
No.
it. Yes, and you're putting it on me. And no, Marie, I stated what I said to its extent,
Right.
and that's it.
Okay. Well, then I stated what I stated to extent, and that's it.
And we have had a number of special meetings at Manning. Now, I shouldn't say a number, but we have had from time to time special meetings at Manning that are not recorded. We also
No,
have.
I mean, I can't
Excuse me,
recall one
Dan,
that hasn't
Dan,
been
Dan,
recorded.
Dan, can I have the floor for
But
a
you made a
minute?
statement of fact that actually was
Dan, Joel
unfactual.
is-
Can
speaking.
I have the floor? You can then, We've had a number of meetings that don't get recorded. We also have board-level committee meetings that don't get recorded, where lively discussions could ensue as well. So if we want to look at options for providing some sort of recorded record of those meetings, I don't have any issue with that. But we all knew, we've all known how things go when we're at Manning. We typically don't have recorded meetings.
So I just,
So, and.
we don't
and-
all know, so don't put words in the rest of our mouths, because we have had meetings
Have you
at
been
Manning
to
that
meetings?
were
Yes,
televised
we have.
and/or recorded, so
We
I don't,
have
it's not
had
an
one.
assumption that it isn't. I don't expect every single thing to be televised, but to be quite frank with you, my assumption was actually that open scheduled board meetings were recorded. So my fault for making a false assumption, no problem, but don't say we all know, because I've been at meetings at Manning's that were televised or that
And-
were recorded. So
right.
that, I'm willing to say I made an assumption that was false, but, if that's your opinion, I think it should be your opinion, not
It is,
not
it-
cast
well,
on
it
everybody.
is, we have all attended meetings that have not been recorded at Manning, and they're very infrequent. And, if we want to look into doing something, I'm all fine with that. I really don't have an issue with it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments?
Sorry. So I just wanted to stop by. My name is Kelly Reed. I have a daughter
Please
that...
state your name for the record first.
My name is Kelly Reed. I have a daughter that attends at Westmont Junior High, and I came here straight from work where it's pajama day. So I just wanted to talk to you about a situation that's been happening a few times with our bus, specifically the after-school activities bus. Today, my daughter was dropped off, I don't even know, she was dropped off somewhere by the tracks when we live over by Miller School, okay, because she was on the activity bus with a bus driver who was a substitute bus driver, and he passed her bus stop, and then when she asked him, when the bus was somewhat empty over by the tracks, whether he was going to take her home and told him where she lived, he told her, and I pretty much quote, because other kids heard this, that he did not care how they got home, it's not his problem. Okay, that he wasn't going back that direction, and he did not care how she got home, it was not his problem. So she called from a friend's house. My parents are at home in our home, waiting for her to come home. Meanwhile, I'm getting calls at work from both of them, worried that she's dead or who knows where she's at. She called our house at 5:35 from her friend's house, saying that she got off 5 blocks away from her friend's house, okay, because he didn't even drop them anywhere near the vicinity of her friend's house. He just stopped and said, "This is the stop. Do you live near here? Get out." Okay, so they got out. She went to her friend's house. There were 3 other children on the bus who were also living near us, Bella and Ashley, who I believe have also already called the school to complain or the bus to complain. Bella, I think, had a cell phone and may have called her mother and convinced this bus driver to take her home. But so there's just some confusion. I don't know if it's just only when there's a substitute bus driver, but most of the bus drivers drop the children off. And in fact, my father has gone to the bus company and spoken to the bus people and was told that in the dark at 4:15, 5:15, when it's dark outside, that they will be dropping the children off at their home or within a block of their home, okay? So now when I'm talking to the bus company today, they're telling me there's an activity route, and the bus drivers who know the route sometimes stop at children's houses, or it stops where that is not on the activity route, versus today, because it was a substitute, he didn't know the route, so he could only follow exactly what was on there. Okay, so again, I just want to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because this is at least the 3rd time that my child has not been dropped off anywhere near her home, and for the bus driver to say that it's not his problem as to how he gets home, to me, that was unbelievable that he would say that, because it is his problem. She got on his bus, she's his responsibility, and if anything, God forbid, were to happen to her, who was going to be responsible for that? Someone's going to be responsible for that, and we just don't want it to come to that scenario in the first place. So I just need to make sure that somebody on the next level, because we have complained, I spoke to the principal at the junior high the last time she was let off, nowhere near our house. And so now I just want to take it to the next level, because it really is concerning. And we cannot just have children being dropped off anywhere without knowledge of how they're going to get home. And that's all I have to say.
Would you like to? I see you waving, Mr. Fiala.
We share the same concerns as the parents. There's a couple problems here. Number one, when I ride the bus with the kids, it all works out. Kids are attentive, they sit there, they listen, they get off at the proper stops. If there's a mistake with the driver, we correct that and go on. I can't ride the bus every time, and you're well aware of that. What I do see is a problem is a couple things. Number one is an inconsistency in the route, the way the route is being handled. Yes, there are substitute drivers, and I have to agree with you with that. I've been in contact with the bus company several times. We were in contact with the bus company tonight, myself, and when I was fielding calls from parents, Ms. Quattrone was talking to the bus company to try to straighten the route out. What I've talked about, I have two people that I come in contact with there, Joanne, and I think Ms. Anderson has dealt with Joanne and Tom. The thing that I told them, I said, we have junior high kids here. What we need here is a consistency in the bus route and the way it's handled. I've asked them to stop at each route and call off the intersection. We've also talked to the kids, and I've asked advisory teachers to just review the 4:15 schedule again to see so kids know what the route is. They're young kids. We have some kids who are not always sure of where they are in the big scheme of the map of the town. We go over that with them to make sure that they know that this is the closest route. We have bus drivers at time taking kids and deviating from a path, it sounds like, and they do more of an on-demand route instead of following the route itself. This sends a mixed signal to the kids. One day they may get dropped off very closely, and again, they're not following the 4:15 route. I do share your concerns. This can't go on. I've also had where tomorrow we'll call the bus company and say, hey, can I have the tape from the bus? There wasn't a tape on the bus. That makes our job extremely hard because now it's me trying to talk to 40-some kids or whatever, trying to get a straight story here. So I can assure you that we've talked to the bus company several times tonight. We will talk to them tomorrow. We will make sure that they're following the 4:15 route. We will go over that again with the kids at school to understand that the 4:15 route is different than the morning and afternoon route. We do not service a section, we don't have 6 buses serving a section of the town. We have 1 bus servicing the whole town. And we need consistency in the drivers so that they do stop. We will reinforce it with the students so that they're paying attention and listen to the stop, and to make sure that they're getting off at the right one. But the driver has to help us out here a little bit. And can I say that the bus driver definitely say that? I won't know, and I won't be able to tell that one until we get a bus tape, and that'll be requested tomorrow. That's our usually standard practice on this one, and hopefully we do get a bus tape so we can review that. And again, it's just consistency in the route. We need that to be followed every day so that students know when they get off. And that's, like I said, we've been in constant contact with the bus company on this one because we're kind of upset that this is going on, and we certainly want our students safe. So I hope that kind of gives you some information. It certainly doesn't solve the problem right now, but I want you to know that we've been on contact, and we're going to be meeting with bus officials tomorrow when we can get over there and to find out what the heck's going on around this one. And if you've got any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Yeah, I do. As far as the tapes go, if there's not a tape and you ask for a tape, what happens?
If we ask for a tape and there's not a tape, we contact Kim. Kim's contacted the bus company, and many times they say, oh, we're whatever, that type of thing. And
Is that in their contract?
It is, and the only penalty is that we don't pay the monthly monitoring fee. We are going out to bid for our transportation
Something to
contract
put
this
in the
year,
bid
so
spots.
definitely that will be something that's addressed, and it's been an issue that's been discussed. It was discussed last year, it's been discussed this year. Unfortunately, they have a lot of turnover in management as well as driving staff, and we work with them on a continual basis to try and improve the quality of service we receive.
Well, I think my other concern would be that, Ron and his team are interacting with the bus company, but junior high isn't the only place we've had some of these types of issues.
Right.
So while there's a lot of
Right.
good work going on, this is one building. How are we combining all of our district-wide bus issues, which I know for a fact
All
have been
bus
some?
issues should be reported to me.
Okay.
And then I keep track of them. I have conversations with the bus company about that. And, we have resolved successfully all of those issues. We thought we had this one resolved. This because it happened, last week or
We
whatever?
just had a discussion, Kim and I were on the
Right.
phone saying, no, I talked to the
Right.
bus officials, they're going to stop at every stop for us, and this, I think we've got it cleared up. And a new driver happened again
And now we had a
today.
new issue today.
Yeah,
so,
it's frustrating for all of us.
And again, we can't control, I wish we could control the substitute bus drivers, but again, you know, the communication to parents about what the expectation for the bus stop is, the communication to the students of what the expectation is for the route, and then to make us aware as quickly as possible when there is an issue so that we can follow up with the bus company. And like I said, this is, all other issues that we've had have been resolved. This is a new one.
So kind of to Joel's point about if we're going out to bid, maybe we need to have some language in the contract that's a little more succinct around both penalty and expectation, because what
Right.
you just said is the parents have been given an expectation, the students have been given an expectation. I haven't heard anybody yet say the bus company and the bus drivers have been given an expectation. You know what? They're the adults.
Right.
You can tell a sixth grader all day long, this is where you get off the bus, but I want to make sure that we're setting equally as stern or specific an expectation for the adult in this process.
And we do, and we have the option if we have an issue with a bus driver where we think that that is someone that is, does not meet our standards, that we can have that driver replaced, and we have done that in the district since I've been here. So, you know, again, a substitute, it's a little bit difficult, but clearly if we have issues with that, we can request that that substitute not be there. Again, I would like, this is the first I've heard about this issue, so I would like to be able to, you know, what happened today, so I would like to be able to see if we have the bus tape, and clearly if we don't have the bus tape, that conversation's gonna be on a much different level with First Student.
Shannon's point, regardless of what the bus driver may or may not have said to that student, if that student, my expectation is that adult is responsible for that child's safety to get home. And my expectation wouldn't be to drop them off wherever. You know, this happens to be the end. If I'm on the train and I sleep and I end up in Aurora, I'm over 18, that's my responsibility. If I'm on a bus and I'm a sixth grader, my expectation is that adult is going to make sure that child is safe, not dropped off in some dark corner.
So that's what I said about the contract. If there, is there some kind of contractual expectation if a student misses their stop? You know, we need to have some kind of,
And just so you know, again, and I apologize, and we didn't even have time to talk about this one because I was on the phone and then came here. Our last issue with this one, when I talked to the company the next day, I said, you know, you guys, they're junior high kids. If they miss a route, you certainly have to turn that bus around and correct the mistake. Because we can't just expect them to get off and think, oh, we're going to teach them a lesson here or something like that. That's not the way it works. So again, and like I said, the best I can tell you right now is I'm going to have this conversation again with them and to say, yes, we'll follow the route. Yes, we're trying to follow with our children. But if there is a mistake, turning the bus around and taking it back, whatever, and then I think that's a doable thing. And that's an expectation that I will reinforce with the company again.
and I think going forward, when we get into negotiations or something,
Right.
we should
And
stipulate
Shannon,
something.
They have procedures, so again, it's, you know, and they have certain procedures that their bus drivers are supposed to abide by. So if we have a driver who isn't abiding by those procedures, then again, we need to have that person removed from our routes.
And again, we have a tape tomorrow. Suppose that comment should be heard and that will be dealt with. Okay?
I just have a real quick question.
Sure.
If you had to guess, how many times you ask for the tape and get the tape? How many times, would you say their success rate is?
You know what, I can't give you a number, but too many times, I would have to say.
Would you
with
say
that
their
one.
success rate is 50% of the time, 80% of the time they have the tape, 90% of the time?
I can't comment on that because I only hear when we don't have the tape. I don't hear when we do, that
Do you
we
hear
did
that a
have the
lot?
tape. I've heard it probably 5 times this year.
But here's the thing too, if nothing happens on the bus, and there could be a tape player up there, but it may not be working or something like that, if nothing happens, we couldn't tell you if the tape's not there. The only time is
I
if the
understand.
perfect storm comes together, that
Yep.
you do have something, and then we ask for it. And that has happened to us.
Thanks.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, give me a call. I'll be glad to help us out with anything.
Any other public comments?
One quick one. My name is Bob Reed, Kelly's father. In this situation, particularly tonight, and this has happened before, 4:15 bus, 5:30, 5:45, there's no kids. We don't know where they're at. There's no one to call. We've called the school. Nobody answers at school. My daughter did get a hold of the bus company tonight, and I tried to call this before because it's happened before, and information didn't even have the phone number, and nobody would call or nobody would answer. Once we reach a certain point, we have no way of contacting our kids. We don't know where they're at. And if there's, some place where we could leave a message that we're looking for our kids, when does the time come when we got to call the cops and say, hey, where's my kid? It's dark out. It's just a parent thing to start worrying about it, especially when they're an hour and a half late. And we're only, actually, where they come out of the school, we're pretty much the first or second stop. So they're there 15, 20 minutes. And I did see this particular bus tonight stopped at Washington and Trowie, because I was coming the other way. I seen no lights. There was no lights on the bus, so he never made an official stop. If he announced to the kids that where he was at, I believe the bus was pretty crowded. You got all these kids in there screaming and hollering. They probably didn't even hear it. So, just hope it stops.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. Then before we go into close, I just would like to say, knowing that it is close to the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to everyone. Hopefully everyone has a very wonderful, joyous time with their families. We are going to go into close, and there'll be one short vote afterwards on minutes. And the next school board meeting is January 10th at 6:30 at the Westmont High School. The one after that is January 24th, 7 o'clock here at the Village Hall. So the chair
Marie,
will...
can we add, I just have one quick question as a personnel question. Can we add that to closed?
Sure. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing collective negotiations and personnel. So moved.
And closed session minutes.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry. Second.
Anybody seconded? No.
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli, yes. Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes. Ruling on the closed minutes till the next meeting. Okay. So the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Be safe.